Why do so many Americans seem to support secession? A recent story came out that said about 12 US states have active and significant secessionist movements. Now, while some of these do entail the state becoming its own country, such as the Texas nationalist movement, what we're seeing more commonly is a certain part or region of a state seeking to break away and become its own state within the Union. Perhaps the most well-known poster child of this is the Greater Idaho movement, which is seeking to break away several conservative counties from Oregon and integrate them into Idaho. However, similar movements exist in California, Illinois, and New York, to name a few. Couple this with significant discussions of a civil war in the United States, not to mention the turbulence of the upcoming election, and many outsiders, and even a good few Americans, are beginning to believe that the United States is falling apart or fracturing as a country. It is certainly true that the US is undergoing a significant period of polarization and division. And to the average spectator, it might seem that the divide is right between parties, the red states and the blue states, but it's much more complicated than that. Hold your horses, pal. We need to take a minute to talk about today's sponsor, World of Warships Legends. Don't click away just yet. It's their birthday. You might have heard about them before, but this is a naval strategy MMO that you can play for free on mobile or right on your consoles, facing up against other players or the computer in PvP battles that can range from 9v9 to 4-team matchups. World of Warships of course prides itself on its detailed mechanics and ship models, the game featuring destroyers, battleships, cruisers, and aircraft carriers from 11 different countries, with the fleet expanding every few weeks. Yes, World of Warships is celebrating its 5th anniversary, and they're celebrating with an ancient Greek-styled event. Play the Aegean Arrow campaign along with several other events, unlock divine commanders like Zeus, Athena, and Poseidon, and collect all sorts of new items from now to September 9th. Follow the link below to start playing for free and get in on the birthday perks while they last, and if you're a new player, you'll get a sweet new starter pack featuring the American Tier 3 premium battleship Arkansas, yes, I know how to pronounce that and I'm not going to take that back, German Tier 3 cruiser Karlsruhe, that one I don't even know how to pronounce, 7 days of premium membership, 10 red, white, and blue camouflages, and 10 hunter camouflages. Now, let's get back to the video. Why would a certain region of a state want to break away and become its own state? Why would it want to join a more conservative state? What drives a population to want to be more independent? The answer is very plain and simple, and it's representation. Here in the state of New York, it's common for people all across the state to be resentful of the city. Of course, the city has an overwhelming sway in state politics. If you're a New Yorker living in Binghamton, or Rochester, or Saratoga Springs, or Port Jefferson, or wherever in the state, you probably feel that your vote doesn't have as much say as the city's. It doesn't really matter if New Jersey is closer to New York City than Plattsburgh is. 9 times out of 10, New York City is going to have the final say in how statewide policy goes. You have populations in California that feel this way, you have populations in Illinois that feel this way, in Virginia, in Texas. And while on its face, sure, the Republican and Democrat divide does highlight some of these differences, people aren't prepared to secede from Oregon just because they belong to the Republican Party. If we look abroad at any other country, we see a people that's being occupied by a larger country. Sometimes people will talk about the Uyghurs in China, the Ukrainians and Russia, and say, these are two different people that deserve to have their own countries, that deserve to not be dominated by this foreign force. But when we apply that perspective to the United States, especially in the eyes of foreigners will always say, what are you talking about? You're all the same people. How can you feel divided? How can you feel oppressed by one another? Well, the simple fact is that Americans are not all the same people. Americans are not homogenous culturally from one end of the country to another, oftentimes not even within the same states. This includes everything from religion, to culture, to lifestyle, values, history. America is an extremely diverse country, not just in recent history, but across all of its history. You've had several populations here who have varying cultures and values. Just because we all speak English and identify as citizens of the United States, that doesn't mean we're all perfectly uniform. What's good for this American isn't always good for that American. What this American cares about is sometimes considered nonsense by that American. Ask a conservative in the southern states what American values are, and then ask a conservative in New England what American values are, and you're going to get two very different answers. Ask a liberal in California what American values are, and then ask a liberal in Michigan what American values are, and you're going to get two very different answers. This is a subject I've spoken about before in several videos, and I recently put up a video talking about the various nations in America right here if you'd like to check that out after this video. But when I hear non-Americans talking about how, oh, Americans are all the same, Americans are all uniform, why can't they just get along? This is coming from a place of misunderstanding. It's a very shallow view of American culture. Couple this with the fact that the borders of several states, just about every state, is basically arbitrary, and no wonder you have states that want to change their borders or secede or whatever the heck. Let me ask some of my European viewers, my viewers in Asia, maybe not in Africa because you guys are dealing with this too, but how would you feel if somebody just drew some straight lines on a map and said, okay, that's your homeland, govern that as you will, you have an executive, you have a constitution, you have your own laws, but your borders are this square. That's just a recipe for chaos. Sometimes people talk about how the borders in Africa are so arbitrary, and as well as the Middle East as well. You sometimes have these discussions. You're going to have division. America, of course, isn't as widely diverse as a place like Africa or the Middle East might be, but still, you have those differences, and a failure to properly represent those differences within state units, within certain polities, that's going to lead to division. That's going to lead to people inside these polities saying, I have no representation. I want to be represented. I want to have policy that represents me. This is why I talk about the ideology of Utahism. And for those of you unfamiliar, again, the premise of Utahism is you have Utah, which was founded by the Mormons to be sort of a safe haven, a homeland, a Zion for themselves. The Mormons have remained the dominant group in Utah since its founding, and the results speak for themselves. It's ranked as one of the happiest states in all of the Union, insofar as quality of life, sense of community, satisfaction with politics. It's a model state that other states should take inspiration from. Hawaii is another good example of this, and sure, people might say, oh, everybody would be happy if they were living on a tropical island. But the situation is Hawaii is so isolated that it really has no choice but to be this model community for its population. I think as a country, it's long overdue that we change our state borders. We need state lines that actually reflect our lives. State borders by the people and for the people. I can't at all blame these counties in Oregon for wanting to join Idaho. And I'll emphasize that I don't think the Greater Idaho movement is a perfect movement, but it's a good start. On its face, it looks like a bunch of Republican counties that want to join a more Republican state, and that's all fine and dandy. If other states follow that line of thinking, I think that's fine as well. But the real end goal should be states that represent culture. And I think given enough time, that will manifest. You will have a situation where maybe not in the case of Greater Idaho, but let's say we have a state breakup where a part of Illinois breaks away to join with Missouri. Now, Missouri is already a fairly Republican state, but it's also an extremely divided state insofar as culture is concerned. In the south of the state, you have a particular influence of Southern culture there. In the northeastern part of the state, you have sort of an extension of that culture which exists in Illinois. You of course have the greater St. Louis area, which is basically an extension of the Midwest. And then you have the Northwest, which arguably has more in common with its western neighbors. So yeah, you can have a situation where the red counties of the state break away to join another red state, but given enough time, they'll recognize, oh, even among other conservatives, we still have some differences and divides insofar as what kind of policy we want to put forward and what kind of lives we want to live. So, you have another redrawing of borders, and boom, you have a state that now accurately represents a certain culture in America. Frankly, even for the Greater Idaho movement, it is an uphill battle. You're looking at a lot of approval that needs to be achieved, both at the state legislature for both states, as well as then going to Congress and achieving approval there. I think this is definitely something that should be remedied. Oftentimes, people will say, oh, well, we can't change state borders, it's not worth it, it's going to take too much effort. Given the situation we're in with this level of polarization, I think a bit of effort is worthwhile. But it's true, it is difficult, and because of that, there should be some solution or way of making this easier. Just as a rough idea, one of the things that could be done is perhaps a passing of a constitutional amendment which allows certain counties to petition to become their own state. And let's say if the counties have a population of 1 million people or over, it can go through and they can become their own state, or they can join up with another state. The reason I'd say a population of 1 million would be a good number to go for is because of the representation issue. If you have a state break away and it has, I don't know, let's say only a couple tens of thousands of people, it's not going to be fair to the other states who need close to 1 million people to get a representative in Congress. We already have this issue with states like Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, which don't even crack 1 million in population. If memory serves, Wyoming and Vermont have only about 500,000. Representation is one of the big issues. We want to significantly avoid the issue of gerrymandering. Of course, this is going to be shifting things up a little bit because you will have new states, you'll have states consolidate, populations will change. That is going to affect the balance in Congress, no doubt. But if this can be done in a way that maintains some stability and maintains a fair balance, that's also going to be important. Frankly, I'd be in favor of seeing a state like Vermont or Wyoming integrated into a neighboring state that has similar political views until they're able to reconsolidate themselves into a state that has at least 1 million citizens. But those are just my thoughts on the issue. I think Utahsism would really go a long way to alleviating a lot of these divides that we have in the country and actually giving the several different people in this country fair representation and just ending this divide at the national level where it's like, well, everything needs to go my way, or, I'm gonna secede, I'm gonna start a civil war, this sort of thing. If you have a state that represents you, it gives you all the policy you want, if you have a Utah, then you're not gonna be that radical. Utah is an extremely Republican state, but whenever discussions of civil war come along, it's like, nah, we're not going to get involved in that. We're going to stay loyal to the Union. They're happy. They're happy with the status quo as they have it. But I think that's where I'll end the video for now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out. Thanks again to World of Warships Legends for sponsoring today's video. Follow the link below to get in on the 5th anniversary perks while they last.